Carl Jung reveals the 18 signs. You're entering the most powerful phase of your life. What if everything falling apart in your life right now is actually a sign that you're about to enter the most powerful soul-aligned phase you've ever known? Carl Jung didn't just believe in healing. He mapped the exact signs that your soul is evolving. And today, you'll discover the truth no one ever told you about your deepest transformation. Part 1. The cracking of the ego. A call from within. At the threshold of any deep psychological transformation, Carl Jung emphasized that the first and often most unsettling sign is the disruption of the ego. This isn't simply a loss of confidence or a period of emotional instability. It's the breakdown of the constructed self you've unknowingly worshipped. It's the beginning of the death of the false you. And Jung saw this as the sacred initiation into a greater phase of individuation. The ego, as Jung defined it, is the center of consciousness. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are, your roles, preferences, social identities, goals, and even your traumas. Over time, most people mistake this surface structure for their total being. However, when life begins to strip that structure apart, when the beliefs you've clung to begin to falter, and when your old motivations suddenly feel hollow, this is not failure. This is the first undeniable sign the ego is cracking open so the self can rise. Jung noted that people often misinterpret this moment as depression, burnout, or a midlife crisis. But from the lens of depth psychology, what's happening is far more profound. The psyche is shifting its energy inward. Your unconscious mind, previously content with remaining hidden, is now demanding attention. That strange inner pull you're beginning to feel. That's your true self knocking on the walls of your ego shell. This cracking doesn't always appear as a dramatic collapse. It can begin subtly through a growing dissatisfaction with your career, your relationships, or the way you've been living. Things that once brought you joy no longer satisfy. Your daily routines feel meaningless. You look around and realize you've been sleepwalking. But instead of panic, a strange clarity begins to emerge. This isn't who I really am. This was just a mask. According to Jung, this is what initiates the individuation process, the lifelong unfolding of the self. It starts with the recognition that the ego has limits, that it cannot carry the full burden of meaning, that beyond your persona, the mask you wear for society, lies a deeper essence waiting to be discovered, and to reach it, the ego must crack, fragment, and make room. Jung wrote extensively on this phase, describing it as a sacred wounding. You lose the illusion of control, and that illusion hurts. But, paradoxically, this pain is evidence of growth. He often compared it to the myth of the hero's journey, where the call to adventure begins with a disturbance in the ordinary world. If you've begun to feel that nothing fits anymore, that your identity is too tight, too rehearsed, too dead, then you're being summoned into the depths. And that's the first sign you are about to enter the best phase of your life. Why? Because once the ego begins to crack, the unconscious begins to speak. You may notice more vivid dreams. You may feel intuitions rising like whispers from your soul. Synchronicities. Those strange coincidences Jung called meaningful chance begin to increase. You might find yourself drawn to books, music, or conversations that touch something deep inside, something you didn't even know was missing. The ego doesn't like this. It resists, fights back, clings to old narratives. But the soul has already begun the uprising. And as Jung once said, you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. This moment of ego cracking is your psyche, demanding that you evolve. So, if you find yourself questioning everything, if you feel like your old identity is dying, don't run. Sit with it. Witness the collapse without judgment. Because in the ashes of who you thought you were, the self is preparing to emerge. And that's the first great threshold. You're no longer living from your ego. You're being led by something far deeper, your soul. Part 2. The inner death, when the soul prepares for rebirth. As the ego begins to fragment, another powerful psychological phenomenon emerges, what Jung referred to as a psychic death. This is not about the body dying, but rather the death of the psychological structures that have defined your life until now. It's a descent into what can feel like utter emptiness, confusion, or emotional numbness. But Jung insisted this death is necessary. Without it, the rebirth of the self cannot occur. Most people fear this stage because it mimics many symptoms of depression. You may wake up and feel hollow. The things you once loved, hobbies, people, ambitions now feel meaningless. You might say, "I feel nothing." But this isn't apathy. This is your soul withdrawing its energy from your old life. It's pulling back from everything that no longer serves your deeper truth. Jung described this moment as nigredo in alchemical psychology, the blackening stage, the descent into chaos and darkness. But unlike clinical depression, this inner void carries meaning. It is not a malfunction, but a preparation. It means you're no longer living unconsciously. Your soul has outgrown your former reality, and now the psyche must go dark so that the seeds of something truer can take root. One of Jung's key insights was that transformation often begins with a breakdown of psychic unity. That is, your inner world becomes disjointed, and the pieces of your old personality no longer work together. You can't fake it anymore. You can't go back to the job that drains you, the relationship that limits you, or the beliefs that once felt safe. Everything is being dismantled because you're preparing to rebuild on a new foundation. This stage feels brutal because your conscious mind can't yet see the full picture. The self, your total, whole being knows what's coming, but your ego does not. The ego feels like it's dying, because in many ways, it's losing control. And in Western society, where identity is often built on achievement and status, this collapse can be terrifying. But Jung's psychology offers reassurance this death is sacred, the numbness, the detachment, the loss of passion. These are not signs you are broken. They are signs your inner world is reorganizing, just as a caterpillar must dissolve in the cocoon before becoming a butterfly. The psyche must dissolve its outdated structures before revealing something entirely new. And here's the paradox. Jung points out the more you surrender to this inner death, the more quickly the rebirth will come. But the ego doesn't want to surrender. It wants to hold on, to fix the pain, to return to what was. It might try to numb the discomfort through distractions, addictions, or spiritual bypassing. But Jung warned against that. He believed that true transformation only occurs when we face the darkness directly, when we allow the old to die, with full awareness. There is a strange beauty in this moment. You begin to realize that you don't have to carry the weight of your old self anymore. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to perform. You are finally being stripped down to essence. And while that process is raw and vulnerable, it's also profoundly liberating. This is the second great sign that you're entering the best phase of your life. You feel like you're dying inside, but that inner death is exactly what's making room for the life you were truly meant to live. When you allow the psychic death to happen without resistance, you become a fertile ground for transformation. You are no longer a slave to your past. You are no longer hypnotized by the need to conform. You are standing naked at the crossroads, vulnerable, yes, but also open for the first time to what is truly yours. And from this dark, quiet space, the stirrings of new life begin. Part 3. The uprising of the unconscious. When hidden forces begin to guide you. As the ego cracks and the old self dies away, a new force begins to rise to the surface, the unconscious. Jung viewed the unconscious not as a chaotic pit of irrationality, but as the great storehouse of human potential, wisdom, archetypes, and unexpressed truths. When you begin to sense this force stirring inside you, it's a powerful sign that you are being prepared for transformation, not by the mind you've always relied on, but by the deeper self that has always been watching. The uprising of the unconscious can be quiet or dramatic. For some, it arrives in dreams, vivid, symbolic, and strange. For others, it comes through synchronicities, repeating numbers, meaningful coincidences, uncanny alignments. But regardless of the form, the message is the same. Something bigger than your ego is trying to reach you. Jung described the unconscious as compensatory. That is, it attempts to balance what the conscious mind lacks. If you've been living an overly rational life, the unconscious might send images of passion, chaos, or feeling. If you've been people-pleasing, it might stir up anger or rebellion. If you've silenced your creativity, it may awaken wild and unpredictable dreams. This is not random. This is your psyche's way of pushing you toward wholeness. One of the most powerful signs that the unconscious is rising is that you start to feel things before you can understand them. You may be drawn to certain people, symbols, colors, or emotions. and you don't know why. Something in you begins to crave meaning on a level you can't articulate. You might find yourself saying things like, "I don't know why, but I just feel this is important." That's not confusion. That's intuition breaking through the ego's rigid logic. Jung argued that true transformation only happens when the unconscious and the conscious begin a dialogue. And that dialogue often begins with discomfort. You may feel unsettled. You may begin to question everything: your beliefs, your habits, your identity. You may even feel like you're losing control. But Jung would say this is precisely where the soul wants you, because control is the ego's domain, but surrender is the domain of the self. In fact, Jung saw the unconscious not only as personal, your memories, traumas, desires, but also collective. Within it lie the shared archetypes of humanity, images and forces like the hero, the mother, the shadow, the wise old man. As these begin to stir, you may find yourself stepping into roles or energies you never imagined. You might feel a sudden urge to protect, to lead, to create, or to question, because something ancient is awakening in you. This is the uprising, a psychological revolution that begins quietly, but changes everything. It's a sign that your soul no longer wants to live in a scripted life. It no longer wants to be reasonable. It wants to be authentic. And the unconscious is the voice of that authenticity. During this time, you may also notice an increase in synchronicities, what Jung called meaningful coincidences. These aren't just random events. They are moments where the external world aligns perfectly with your inner experience, almost as if the universe is whispering directly to you. The more you open to the unconscious, the more these alignments appear, and each one carries a message: you are not alone, and you are being guided. But guidance from the unconscious doesn't come with a clear map. It comes in symbols, emotions, and intuitive nudges. That's why Jung emphasized the importance of paying attention, not with your intellect, but with your inner eye. Keep a dream journal, observe patterns, feel into the images that haunt you or inspire you. Because what your ego sees as confusion, the unconscious reveals as coded language from the soul. This rising force may also make you feel like you're breaking down at times. But what's really happening is that your former psychic structure is making room for something larger and wiser. You're becoming receptive to your total self, not just the part of you that fits into society, but the part that belongs to the mystery of life itself. And so, the third great sign that you're entering the best phase of your life is this. You feel pulled by something you can't explain. Your unconscious is no longer quiet. It's rising to claim its place in your life, and that means you are awakening. Part 4. The emergence of the shadow. When the darkness demands to be seen. Once the unconscious begins to rise, it doesn't just bring insight, intuition, and inspiration, it also brings confrontation. One of the first forces to emerge from the depths is what Carl Jung famously called the shadow. If the unconscious is the entire unknown portion of the psyche, then the shadow is the part we most actively avoid. It contains everything we repress, deny, disown, or are ashamed of. And when the shadow surfaces, you are standing at a critical threshold of transformation. Jung insisted that encountering the shadow is not optional, it is essential. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, he wrote. And the pain begins when you start to see that you are not only what you present to the world. You are not only your kindness, your intelligence, your work ethic, your politeness. Beneath those socially acceptable masks live darker, more primal parts of you. Anger, jealousy, fear, resentment, selfishness, lust, manipulation. These qualities are not necessarily evil, but they are inconvenient to the ego. So, you hide them, you rationalize them, you project them onto others. You hate in others what you cannot accept in yourself. But when the shadow arises, often triggered by crisis, heartbreak, or spiritual awakening, those hidden qualities demand to be acknowledged. And here's the paradox. Jung teaches the emergence of the shadow is not a sign of regression, it is a sign of evolution. You are being invited to integrate, to become whole. And that can only happen when the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding finally come into the light of your awareness. This integration process often shows up as emotional turbulence. You might snap at people more easily. You may become defensive, insecure, or reactive. You might feel shame for thoughts you never had before. You may even feel a temporary loss of identity. Why am I thinking this way? Why am I acting like this? But this is the shadow speaking, and instead of rejecting it, Jung advises, get curious. The shadow appears not to punish you, but to complete you. Let's say you've always identified as the good person, helpful, selfless, responsible. The shadow may suddenly bring out rage or bitterness you didn't know existed. This isn't a flaw, it's feedback. Perhaps you've overextended yourself. Perhaps you've ignored your own needs. Perhaps you've been good at the expense of being real. The shadow shows you what the ego cannot admit, that your light becomes stronger when it has roots in your darkness. Jung warned that if the shadow is not confronted, it doesn't disappear. It controls you from the background. Unconscious anger becomes passive aggression. Repressed desire becomes self-sabotage. Buried fear becomes control. But once you make the unconscious conscious, those forces become your allies. They stop hijacking your behavior and start empowering your integrity. Facing the shadow is brutal because it destroys the image you've built of yourself. But this destruction is sacred. It clears the way for your true self, not the persona, not the performance, but the whole, integrated you. The one who can love without losing yourself. The one who can lead without domination. The one who can speak your truth without guilt. During this phase, you may experience more intense projections. You might become irritated or emotionally triggered by people who mirror your disowned traits. This is where the work becomes most potent. Ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them that I haven't accepted in myself? Every emotional reaction becomes a doorway into deeper understanding. This is also where many turn back because the shadow is not pretty. It doesn't flatter you. It breaks your illusions. But if you stay, if you allow the darkness to reveal its teachings, you will begin to notice something astonishing. Your fear of yourself dissolves. You no longer need to hide. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to lie to yourself to feel worthy. And that is the fourth undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life. Your darkness is no longer your enemy. It has become your greatest teacher. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." If you're willing to face your shadow, not just intellectually, but emotionally, you are no longer stuck in the superficial layers of life. You are stepping into depth, complexity, and ultimately, wholeness. Part 5. Inner conflict intensifies. The soul begins its purification. As the shadow surfaces and the unconscious makes itself known, your inner world begins to shift into a psychological battleground. You are no longer moving through life as a single, unified self. Instead, you become a conflict of opposites. This is not dysfunction. It is a necessary stage of Jungian transformation. Your soul is initiating a purification process, one that cannot occur without internal struggle. Carl Jung described this phase as the confrontation between consciousness and unconsciousness, between the ego and the self, between the persona and the shadow. And the result is not peace, at least not at first. The result is chaos, contradiction, and emotional friction. You may feel like you're being torn apart from the inside out. One day you are deeply compassionate, the next you're bitterly resentful. One moment you crave solitude, the next you're aching for connection. One part of you wants to let go of the past. Another part clings desperately to it. This inner division is not a sign that something has gone wrong. In Jungian terms, it means the opposites within your psyche are beginning to polarize so that they can be integrated. The soul cannot evolve until it becomes conscious of its fragmented nature. And so, the tension increases not to destroy you, but to awaken you. Jung believed that psychological wholeness can only be achieved by holding the tension of opposites without trying to collapse it prematurely. Most people want to resolve their contradictions quickly to pick a side, make a decision, shut down the discomfort. But transformation lives in the ability to sit in the fire, to allow conflicting desires, beliefs, and emotions to coexist without trying to silence one or exalt the other. You may, for example, feel a powerful drive to step into your purpose, but also deep fear of failure. You may long for intimacy, but also dread the vulnerability it demands. You may want to break free from an old life, but find yourself secretly nostalgic for its comfort. Jung called this state enantiodromia, the tendency of all things to turn into their opposites when pushed too far. This is not confusion. This is psyche in motion. And in this motion, your soul begins its purification. Like a river flushing out sediment, the psychological conflict washes away the illusions, the conditioning, and the lies you've lived under, what you believed about yourself, what you believed about success, love, identity, and truth is tested. Anything that's not rooted in your authentic nature begins to crumble under the weight of inner contradiction. This stage can be exhausting. You might feel emotionally overwhelmed or mentally fragmented. You may cry without knowing why. You might question your sanity, your path, even your worth. But Jung reminds us when things fall apart inside, it's often because something deeper is trying to come together. In fact, one of the most important signs of this purification is moral conflict, not in the religious sense, but in the existential sense. You begin to ask yourself, am I living in alignment with who I really am? Am I making choices out of fear or out of truth? What am I pretending not to know? These questions don't have immediate answers. They create pressure. They demand stillness. They require honesty. And as uncomfortable as this may be, this pressure is the soul's fire. It's burning away the false, the performative, and the borrowed. The more intense the conflict, the more raw the purification. Jung's notion of individuation, the process of becoming your true, whole self, depends entirely on your ability to endure this phase. Not avoid it, not shortcut it, but endure it. To feel the guilt, the regret, the desire, the rage, and allow it to transform you, not define you. Because once these energies are seen, named, and felt fully, they begin to harmonize into something entirely new. This is the fifth undeniable sign you're entering the best phase of your life. Your inner world is no longer a quiet denial, it's an honest storm, and that storm is washing you clean. To the ego, this feels like losing control. To the self, it feels like being reborn. You are no longer interested in half-truths or hollow victories. You are not here to survive your life, you are here to embody it in its full emotional and spiritual reality. That embodiment begins by walking through this fire of contradiction until what's real finally remains. Part 6. Strange Dreams, the Soul Speaks Through Symbols. As the inner conflict reaches its peak, a new language begins to emerge, one not spoken by the rational mind, but by the symbolic voice of the unconscious. And nowhere is this voice more alive than in your dreams. According to Carl Jung, when the conscious ego is overwhelmed, destabilized, or in transition, the unconscious speaks louder and more vividly through images, archetypes, and symbols while you sleep. That's why, during times of inner transformation, your dreams often become strange, intense, and unforgettable. Jung believed that dreams are not random or meaningless, quite the opposite. He saw them as direct expressions of the soul, offering critical insight into what the conscious mind cannot yet understand. A strange dream during this time is not to be dismissed, it is to be studied. It may reveal truths you're not yet ready to accept, directions you've ignored, or potentials you've barely begun to awaken. At this stage of psychological rebirth, your dreams often become more symbolic than literal. You may dream of floods, broken houses, wild animals, death, rebirth, or unfamiliar landscapes. These images are not accidents, they are archetypal messages, drawn from the collective unconscious. They bypass your intellect and speak directly to your soul. For example, a dream about a house collapsing may reflect the breaking down of your old self. A dream about being lost in the forest might symbolize the descent into the unknown layers of your psyche. Seeing snakes, wolves, or dragons can represent primal instincts or the emerging power of the shadow. And encountering a child, a wise elder, or a wounded figure may point to neglected parts of yourself seeking reintegration. Jung referred to these symbolic figures as autonomous complexes, psychic fragments with their own energy and voice. In dreams, these complexes are no longer hidden. They walk, speak, and confront you. The more intense the transformation you're undergoing, the more dramatic the dream material becomes. But instead of fearing it, Jung encourages us to treat dreams as guides and sacred messengers. This is why Jung developed the technique of dream interpretation through amplification. He taught that we must not reduce dreams to simple meanings like, you dreamt of water, so you're emotional. Instead, we must amplify the symbols, connect them to myth, to cultural stories, to our personal lives, and to universal archetypes. Through this process, your dreams become a mirror of your deepest psychological and spiritual process. You may notice a pattern the more you ignore a truth in your waking life, the louder it becomes in your dreams. The unconscious is relentless in its pursuit of wholeness, and when your soul is preparing you for a new phase of life, your dreams begin to act like spiritual blueprints. They may not offer exact answers, but they show you where to look, what to feel, and what to question. And here's a secret Jung knew well: your ego may lie, but your dreams do not. They are honest, brutally honest, and during times of ego death, they often contain the wisdom you most need if you're willing to see it. Keeping a dream journal during this phase is not just helpful, it's essential. Write down your dreams the moment you wake. Reflect on the images, emotions, and transitions. Over time, patterns will emerge, themes will repeat, and you'll start to realize your soul has been speaking to you in symbols long before your conscious mind caught up. Some people experience what Jung called big dreams during this period: profound, numinous dreams that feel larger than life. These dreams often signal a major psychological turning point. You may wake up with tears in your eyes, or with the sense that something has changed. These are not ordinary dreams. These are initiations. And that brings us to the sixth powerful sign that you're entering the best phase of your life. Your dreams are no longer background noise, they are maps. They are revealing the inner architecture of your transformation. You are no longer being guided only by reason. You are being led by symbol, by image, by ancient language. Your soul is awakening, and it's speaking in the only way it knows how, through metaphor, mystery, and vision. Jung believed that if you learn to listen to your dreams, you will never again be truly lost, because even in your darkest moments, the unconscious will offer a light not to lead you back to the old life, but to guide you into the deeper one that is waiting. Part 7. Withdrawing from the crowd, the demand for sacred solitude. One of the most unexpected yet transformative signs that you're entering the best phase of your life is a growing disinterest in the social noise that once occupied your mind and time. Suddenly, small talk exhausts you. Crowds feel overstimulating. Even your closest relationships might start to feel distant, not because you've become antisocial or cold, but because something within you has shifted. According to Carl Jung, this urge to withdraw is not a regression, it is a deep psychological necessity. When the soul begins to undergo profound change, it instinctively seeks solitude, not isolation in the pathological sense, but sacred separation. A pause from the external so the internal can be heard. Jung believed that growth of consciousness is not possible if a person remains embedded in collective thinking. To hear your own soul, you must first step out of the voices of the tribe. At this point in the process, you're no longer content with surface-level conversations or relationships built on convenience. You start craving depth, truth, and resonance. But those qualities are rare in modern social environments, especially in digital culture, where performance often replaces presence. This creates a natural distancing not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Jung referred to this process as individuation, the development of one's unique psychological and spiritual identity. And individuation, by its very nature, demands a withdrawal from the collective. You cannot become your true self while constantly trying to fit into the molds that society, family, or peer groups have carved for you. The ego wants to belong, but the soul wants to become. And the soul can only become when it's no longer distracted by external expectations. You may find that people no longer understand you, or worse, they think something is wrong with you. You've changed. You're distant. You're not fun anymore. These judgments can sting, but they are further evidence of your evolution. Jung warned that, as you move toward the self, the world may interpret your silence as withdrawal, your discernment as superiority, and your depth as depression. But none of those labels matter. What matters is that, for the first time, you are listening to what is real inside you. This sacred solitude is not a punishment, it is an incubation. Just as seeds require darkness to sprout, the soul requires quiet to emerge. You may spend more time in nature, journaling, meditating, reading, or simply sitting in stillness. These aren't escapes, they're rituals of return. In the quiet, your intuition sharpens, your dreams deepen, your emotional landscape reveals itself. And slowly, something begins to grow a center within you that cannot be shaken. In this space, you also begin to discern between real connection and conditional acceptance. You see more clearly which relationships uplift your soul and which ones drain it. You no longer chase validation because you've begun to anchor yourself in something stronger than approval, inner alignment. Jung emphasized that the individuation process requires the courage to be alone, not forever, but long enough to reclaim your own psychic territory. In solitude, your energy is no longer scattered outward. It gathers, it consolidates, it begins to radiate from within, not in search of attention, but as a quiet authority. And so, the seventh powerful sign that you are entering the best phase of your life is this. You no longer fear being alone. You crave it because you know that solitude is where your truest self is born. This solitude is not loneliness. It is connection to the deeper rhythms of your own being. In fact, many people report feeling more connected to life itself during this time. They begin to speak less, but listen more. They say no to distractions and yes to soul-nourishing experiences. They feel less attached to outcomes and more attuned to presence. This is not detachment, it's recalibration. The world around you might still be moving fast, loud, and chaotic, but within you, a sanctuary is forming, and from that sanctuary, your next life phase will emerge not designed by ego, but shaped by essence. Part 8. Feeling unmotivated. But deep inside, meaning is being rewritten. One of the most confusing signs that you're entering the best phase of your life is the sudden and inexplicable loss of motivation. The goals that once fueled you no longer excite you. The routines that once gave structure to your days now feel empty. You may even struggle to get out of bed, not out of laziness, but because something deeper within you is asking, what is the point of all this? To the ego, this is alarming. In a culture obsessed with productivity, drive, and success, losing motivation is often seen as failure. But from the perspective of Jungian depth psychology, this is not failure, it is a sacred pause. It is your soul saying, the old story no longer fits. Carl Jung saw the loss of outer motivation as a necessary step in the reconstruction of inner meaning. When you're on the brink of transformation, your psyche begins to withdraw energy from activities, identities, and values that no longer serve your individuation. The external world hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. This creates a feeling of disconnection, apathy, or even hopelessness. But beneath that numbness, a new orientation is being formed. This is what Jung referred to as a liminal space, a threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. In this space, the ego no longer drives the engine, but the self hasn't fully taken the wheel. It's like floating between two worlds, the one you're leaving and the one that hasn't yet arrived. This lack of motivation is often accompanied by existential questioning. Why am I doing this job? What does this relationship mean? Why do I care about these goals? You may feel like you're unraveling, but in truth, you are reorienting. The life you built before was likely designed to satisfy the expectations of others' parents, teachers, society, even your past self. But now, for the first time, your soul is demanding authenticity. And authenticity doesn't move fast. Jung emphasized that true purpose arises not from ambition, but from alignment. Until your new values fully crystallize, your psyche withholds energy. It's as if your inner world is saying, no more fuel until we know where we're going. That's why trying to force yourself to feel motivated during this time only deepens the disconnect. What you need is not a productivity hack, but patience, reflection, and trust. This motivational void is not a dead end, it's a reconfiguration. During this period, your unconscious mind is actively working behind the scenes. Old beliefs are being questioned, childhood wounds are being revisited, new archetypal energies are stirring. You may not see the change yet, but it's happening in the roots, not the leaves. You may begin to sense subtle changes. A quiet pull toward a different lifestyle. A desire to simplify, to strip away the non-essential. A craving for creativity, rest, or nature. These aren't distractions, they're breadcrumbs from the soul. They point the way toward a life that is not only productive, but meaningful. Jung taught that in the absence of surface-level motivation, deeper purpose is born, but it requires your willingness to sit in the unknown. This is where many people turn back. They try to reignite the old fire chasing status, stimulation, or validation. But if you resist the void, you miss the message, because the void itself is the message. Your next life cannot be built on the motives of your last one. And that brings us to the 8th undeniable sign: you're entering the best phase of your life. You are no longer driven by external pressure, you are waiting for internal truth. This isn't stagnation, it's sacred gestation, a time of dormancy before the bloom. Jung would say your lack of motivation is a symptom of depth. You are learning to live not from force, but from resonance. And when your next move finally emerges, it won't be because you forced it. It will be because you listened deeply, patiently, and courageously to what your soul was whispering all along. Part 9. Rejecting the old definition of success, when the soul seeks depth over status. As you navigate the collapse of old motivation and begin listening more closely to your soul, something radical begins to shift. Your definition of success starts to dissolve. What once inspired you, achievements, accolades, external validation, suddenly feels hollow. You may even feel embarrassed by how much you once chased things that now seem meaningless. This isn't disillusionment, it's awakening. And in Jungian depth psychology, it marks a profound milestone on the path toward individuation. Carl Jung believed that most people build their lives on what he called the persona, the socially acceptable mask that helps us function in the world. Early in life, we're encouraged to perform, to get good grades, land the right job, maintain the right appearance, and achieve success by society's standards. But this performance eventually comes at a cost. If you've arrived at the point where that cost feels too high, where the image you've maintained is starving your spirit, then you're not failing, you're waking up. This waking up feels like betrayal of your upbringing, your culture, your family's expectations, but it is also liberation. Because for the first time, you begin to ask questions that reach far beneath the surface. What if success isn't about more, but about truth? What if the life I'm chasing isn't the one I actually want? What if I've been winning at a game that doesn't matter to me? These questions can be destabilizing. After all, you've spent years climbing a ladder that now feels like it's leaning against the wrong wall. But Jung would say this collapse is vital, because as long as you're chasing someone else's idea of success, you cannot hear your own calling. This is when a powerful inner rebellion begins. You start to feel resistance toward things you used to tolerate: the empty ambition, the performative grind, the race for status. You become less interested in how things look and more concerned with how things feel. You no longer want to be seen as impressive. You want to be authentic, and that means tearing down the old idols. Jung warned that if we never question our inherited definitions of success, we risk living someone else's life. This is why many people experience a midlife crisis, not because they've failed, but because they've succeeded at building a life that was never truly theirs. When your soul begins to reject the old definition of success, it's not because you're broken, it's because you've grown. And from this growth, a new value system begins to emerge. Success is no longer about competing, it's about aligning. No longer about being admired, it's about being real. Not about being envied, it's about being at peace. Not about quantity, but about quality of presence. You begin to admire different kinds of people, those who are grounded, sincere, creative, inwardly alive. You stop chasing trends and start listening to your own rhythm. You begin asking, what kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching? What is worth suffering for? What legacy do I want to leave, not in numbers, but in energy? This is a psychological reorientation. Your goals shift from outer achievement to inner congruence. You realize that the metrics that matter most, meaning, joy, freedom, connection, integrity, aren't always visible to the outside world. And that's okay, because you're no longer living for the world's applause. You're living for the soul's approval. And so, the 9th undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life is this. You no longer chase success to be someone, you seek depth to be yourself. This is not the end of ambition, it's the beginning of right ambition. You may still want to build, create, or achieve, but now it will come from a place of inner alignment, not external pressure. You are no longer being moved by fear of failure or desire for status. You are being moved by something more enduring, your soul's quiet demand for a meaningful life. Part 10. Childhood Memories. Return, the soul's search for the original self. As you let go of society's version of success and begin to listen to your deeper self, something unexpected often starts to happen. Memories from childhood resurface. You may find yourself reminiscing about moments long forgotten, a scent, a place, a feeling, or even specific scenes from your early years. These memories don't come back randomly. According to Jung, they emerge when the psyche is trying to reconnect you with your original essence, the self, before the world told you who to be. This return to childhood is not regression, it is restoration. Your soul is not trying to pull you backward, it's trying to help you remember who you were before the mask, before the conditioning, before the trauma and societal roles hardened into identity. Jung believed that deep within each of us is a core, a pattern of wholeness that existed long before we built our ego. This self contains our innate values, temperament, instincts, and potential. And when we were children, we were closest to it. We hadn't yet learned to filter ourselves to gain approval. We hadn't yet internalized the guilt, shame, or expectations that would later dominate our adult psyche. So, when childhood memories arise during transformation, it is often because the unconscious is sending you clues, psychic breadcrumbs leading you back to your original blueprint. The games you loved to play, the dreams you used to have, the things that made you feel alive before you knew what success meant. All of these may come back as symbols of what you've lost and what now needs to be reclaimed. Perhaps you recall how you used to draw, sing, write stories, or imagine whole worlds. You might remember how you loved animals, nature, adventure, or quiet time with your thoughts. These aren't just nostalgic memories, they are signs of the authentic self that still lives inside you, waiting to be reawakened. Jung called this return to the childlike core, the rediscovery of the divine child archetype. But the child doesn't just bring light, it also brings wounds. Sometimes, memories arise not of joy, but of pain. You may remember moments of rejection, humiliation, abandonment, or fear. These memories are just as important. They reveal the splits in the psyche, the places where you began to fragment, where you learned it wasn't safe to be fully yourself. Jung saw these wounds not as accidents, but as portals. He wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." So, when these early impressions surface, the task is not to analyze them to death, but to feel them fully, to honor them, to ask, what part of me was buried when this happened? What did I give up in order to be accepted? What part of my soul was silenced that is now ready to speak again? During this phase, your soul is digging deep, not just to heal, but to revive. You are remembering who you were before the world shaped you. And that remembering brings clarity. It brings simplicity. It reveals that many of your current struggles stem from the fact that you've drifted too far from the original self. And now, life is calling you back home. This can manifest in small, beautiful ways. You might feel a sudden desire to play, to be creative, to move your body without purpose. You might reconnect with activities or passions from your youth. You might cry unexpectedly when you see an old photo or hear a song from childhood. This isn't emotional weakness, it's emotional truth. Your soul is showing you the map back to what matters. Jung believed that transformation doesn't just mean building something new, it also means recovering what was lost. And the child within you holds the key to that recovery. This inner child is not naive or soft. It is fiercely alive, deeply intuitive, and profoundly resilient. By reconnecting with this part of yourself, you are not going backward. You are rebuilding the future on the foundation of what is real. And that brings us to the 10th unmistakable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life. Your soul is guiding you not just forward, but inward to reclaim the version of you that was never broken, only buried. In this space, healing happens not through force, but through remembrance. You don't have to become someone else to evolve. You have to remember who you were before the world told you to forget. And from that remembering, you'll move forward not as a copy of who you think you should be, but as the embodiment of who you've always truly been. Part 11. Feeling connected to something greater. When the soul tastes the numinous. After the storm of ego death, shadow confrontation, and emotional purification, a subtle but extraordinary shift begins to occur. You start to feel, perhaps quietly at first, that you are not alone in the universe. Not in a sentimental or superstitious way, but in a visceral, soul-deep knowing. There is a force moving through your life. There is meaning pulsing beneath the chaos. And for the first time, you begin to feel deeply connected to something far greater than yourself. Carl Jung called this experience the numinous, a term borrowed from theology to describe the awe-inspiring, mysteriously sacred energy that transcends the rational mind. When you begin to feel this presence not necessarily as a deity, but as an underlying intelligence, a living depth to existence, you are stepping into one of the most powerful phases of psychological and spiritual growth. This connection to something greater isn't about dogma. It's not about joining a religion or adopting someone else's belief system. It's about experiencing directly and internally that life is not random, that your struggles, your breakdowns, your awakening, and even your deepest pain have all been part of a larger movement of the soul. During this time, you may begin to notice synchronicities more often, those eerie, perfectly timed events that Jung believed were manifestations of the unconscious aligning with the outer world. You might feel a sudden sense of peace during a moment of solitude, or be overcome with emotion in nature, or sense that a difficult moment is being held by something unseen. These experiences are not hallucinations. They are what Jung described as the self, the totality of the psyche, beginning to take the lead. The ego operates in fragments, but the self operates in wholeness. And when the self begins to emerge more fully, it brings with it a sense of interconnectedness, not just with others, but with the flow of life itself. You begin to see that your healing is not separate from the healing of others, that your purpose is not self-centered, but soul-centered, that you are not here to conquer the world, but to serve something far more intelligent than personal ambition. In this stage, your relationship with the unknown changes. You stop demanding certainty. You stop needing to control outcomes. You begin to trust the unfolding, even when it doesn't make sense. This is not resignation, it is reverence. You realize that some of the most profound shifts in your life happen not because of your willpower, but because of an unseen orchestration that guided you into exactly what your soul needed. Jung saw this as the point where psychology meets spirituality, not in the form of escapism, but in grounded transcendence. You become deeply aware that there is more to life than what you can explain. And this awareness doesn't make you less rational, it makes you more alive. You begin to live with a sense of participation in something mysterious, beautiful, and larger than the sum of your personal story. And with that realization comes peace, not the peace of escape, but the peace of alignment. You no longer feel like you're wandering aimlessly. Even in moments of uncertainty, you can sense that you're being moved by something wise and ancient. The self, the psyche, the divine, call it what you will. It's not about the name, it's about the feeling, the knowing, the deep inner silence that whispers, you are part of something sacred. And that brings us to the 11th undeniable sign that you're entering the best phase of your life. You are no longer chasing meaning, you are experiencing it in every breath, every step, and every silence. You feel the presence of the deeper order behind all things. This doesn't mean you have all the answers, but you're okay with not having them. You're not here to control the mystery. You're here to dance with it. Part 12. You begin to lose your fear of suffering. When pain becomes a portal. At a certain point in your inner journey, a strange and powerful realization begins to dawn. You are no longer terrified of suffering. It's not that pain disappears, it still comes through loss, uncertainty, heartbreak, or failure. But your relationship with it changes fundamentally. Instead of resisting it with all your strength, you begin to meet it with curiosity, with presence, even with a quiet sense of reverence. According to Carl Jung, this shift marks a critical psychological breakthrough, because in modern society, suffering is treated as a problem to be fixed, avoided, or medicated away. But Jung believed that suffering, when approached consciously, is not destructive, it's transformational. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." In other words, suffering is not the opposite of awakening, it is the path to it. When you stop fearing suffering, something miraculous happens. You stop running from yourself. You stop abandoning your emotions. You stop numbing, hiding, distracting, or pretending. You begin to walk into the fire, not to burn, but to purify. This is what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. It means you no longer need to resolve or escape pain immediately. You can stay with it, sit with it, learn from it. And when you do, you start to realize that suffering contains seeds of revelation. A heartbreak reveals the illusions you built around love. A failure exposes the parts of you still tied to ego. A betrayal teaches you about boundaries, trust, and your inner strength. Anxiety brings your attention to the conflict between who you are and how you're living. Instead of seeing pain as a punishment, you begin to see it as a teacher, one that's brutal, yes, but also deeply wise. Jung emphasized that when we repress or reject suffering, it festers in the unconscious. It becomes neurosis. It expresses itself as addiction, projection, or compulsive behavior. But when we engage with our suffering consciously, when we hold it, name it, feel it, it becomes fuel for individuation. In this stage, your emotional vocabulary deepens. You stop labeling emotions as good or bad. Sadness isn't weakness. It's a call to slow down and return to the heart. Anger isn't failure. It's the psyche demanding justice or truth. Fear isn't a defect. It's a signal that part of your psyche feels unprotected. You become emotionally literate not in theory, but in embodiment. And with this literacy comes liberation. You no longer panic when grief appears. You allow it to move through you. You no longer suppress anger. You honor it without harming others. You no longer avoid difficult conversations, you enter them with grounded honesty. Yes, you no longer chase endless happiness, you seek depth, presence, and authenticity. This capacity to be with suffering doesn't make life easier, but it makes you stronger. Not in a hardened way, but in a soft, unshakable way. You carry yourself differently, not because you're invincible, but because you know you're resilient. You trust that no matter what comes, joy or sorrow, you can remain whole because you've met the darkest parts of yourself and survived. And so, the 12th undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life is this. You no longer run from pain. You walk through it with eyes open, knowing that every wound contains wisdom and every descent holds the possibility of rebirth. You are not afraid to break because you know that your true self is not made of glass, it is made of soul. And the soul does not shatter, it expands through every experience, both light and dark. This is the deep, quiet power of someone who has been broken open and found gold inside the cracks. Part 13. An irresistible creative urge emerges when the soul demands to be expressed. As the inner transformation deepens and your relationship with suffering shifts, a powerful force begins to stir within you, the urge to create. This isn't necessarily about becoming an artist in the traditional sense. It's not about painting, writing, or performing, though it could be. This creative energy is deeper than craft. It is the soul's need to express itself, to give form to the truths, insights, and feelings that words often cannot contain. Carl Jung believed that the creative impulse is archetypal, an intrinsic part of the human psyche. He considered it a sign that the self, the totality of who you are, is rising into consciousness. When you begin to create not out of ego, but out of necessity. Because you have to, because something in you needs to come through, you are experiencing a sacred sign. Your soul is ready to participate in life by contributing something uniquely yours. This creative urge doesn't feel like a hobby. It feels like a compulsion with purpose. You may suddenly feel called to write about your journey, to share your insights with others, to dance, to design, to build, to heal, to teach, or to birth an entirely new life path. Whatever form it takes, the energy behind it is the same expression as integration. You are no longer content to process your evolution silently. The energy within you now wants to move, to become visible, to take shape in the world. Jung called this active imagination the process through which unconscious material becomes embodied through creative forms. And in this embodiment, healing is accelerated. It's important to understand this creativity isn't about perfection. It's not about producing something polished or impressive. In fact, many people who feel this urge also feel vulnerable. What if I'm not good enough? What if people don't get it? But these doubts are remnants of ego. Your soul doesn't care about applause. It cares about truth. This is why the creative process at this stage often feels raw. You're not inventing something, you're channeling something. A truth that has lived within you all along is now demanding shape, voice, and motion. You may feel like you're pouring your inner life into your creations because you are. And this act is not indulgent, it's sacred. It is how the soul becomes real in the world. During this stage, you also begin to notice a shift in how you see others. You stop being impressed by titles, wealth, or fame. You start being moved by authentic expression, a poem that speaks to your heart, a conversation that touches your core, a piece of music that brings tears to your eyes. Why? Because your soul now recognizes itself in the art and expression of others. This deepens your connection to humanity. You realize that we are all creators, whether we know it or not. We're constantly shaping our lives, our choices, our relationships. And when you begin to create consciously from the soul rather than from the ego, you become a living embodiment of the very transformation you've undergone. And so, the 13th undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life is this. You feel an overwhelming need to express your inner world, not to be seen, but to be whole. This is the point where the inward journey begins to turn outward, where your insights, your scars, your wisdom, and your beauty no longer remain hidden. They begin to take form not to impress others, but to offer something real, something human, something healing. Jung believed that every person has within them a seed of the divine, and that seed seeks manifestation through creation. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be good. You only need to be honest. And when you follow that creative pull, you are not just expressing yourself, you are fulfilling your purpose at the soul level. Part 4. Old relationships naturally fall away, no longer aligned with your frequency. As your inner world shifts, your creative self awakens, and your values evolve, something else begins to change your relationships. People you once felt close to begin to feel distant. Conversations that once excited you now fall flat. The desire to please or fit in fades. And without any drama or malice, certain connections begin to dissolve. You're not pushing anyone away. You're just no longer on the same frequency. Carl Jung observed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, naturally causes the psyche to reorganize everything around it, including your social world. When you align with your soul, you emit a different psychological energy, and not everyone in your life will resonate with it. That dissonance isn't rejection, it's reflection. You've changed, and your relationships are reflecting that evolution back to you. At first, this can feel disorienting. You may wonder, why do I feel so disconnected from them now? Why can't I tolerate these conversations anymore? Why does this relationship suddenly feel like a cage? But these questions aren't signs that something's wrong. They're signs that your soul is reclaiming your relational integrity. When you were living from ego, you may have built connections around convenience, survival, or social approval. You may have tolerated toxic dynamics, betrayed your boundaries, or performed roles that weren't really you. Now, you can't. Not because you've become harsh or superior, but because your nervous system and energy field no longer allows self-betrayal. The cost of pretending is simply too high. Jung taught that as we integrate the unconscious and move toward wholeness, we begin to attract relationships that match our inner truth and release those that were based on illusion. Some of those illusions may have felt comforting: the friend you could gossip with, the partner who validated your wounds, the circle that supported your persona, but not your essence. Letting go of these relationships may feel like grief, but underneath that grief is freedom. You may also notice that the relationships that remain go through a metamorphosis. They deepen. They become more honest. You start having real conversations, not just about events or opinions, but about purpose, patterns, pain, healing, and growth. Small talk dies. Soul talk rises. At the same time, you may find yourself alone more often. But it's not the loneliness of emptiness, it's the solitude of sovereignty. You no longer fear being alone because you're no longer lonely in yourself. You've built a connection with your own soul. And from that place, you begin to attract people who are also rooted in truth. This is not about superiority, it's about resonance. Everything is energy, including relationships. And when your frequency changes, the architecture of your life adjusts accordingly. Some people will fall away quietly. Others may resist your change. Some may accuse you of changing too much or pulling away. And they're not wrong. You have changed. But you haven't abandoned them, you've just returned to yourself. And in doing so, you make space for something new, relationships based on soul, not survival. So, the 14th undeniable sign that you're entering the best phase of your life is this. Your relationships are no longer based on habit or obligation, they are based on alignment. You no longer chase people who don't see you. You no longer overstay where your spirit is not welcomed. You no longer compromise your boundaries for the illusion of belonging. Instead, you honor your energy, speak your truth, and let what is no longer real fall away. As Jung would say, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And as you do, the people who are meant for you, who see you, feel you, and meet you where you are, will begin to appear. Not because you found them, but because you finally became visible to them. Part 15. You begin to accept your imperfection when wholeness matters more than image. As the layers of performance and ego continue to fall away, a quiet and deeply healing realization dawns: you no longer need to be perfect to be whole. This doesn't mean you stop growing or striving. It means you stop punishing yourself for being human. You begin to understand that imperfection isn't a flaw to fix, it's a fact to embrace. And in that embrace, a deeper kind of strength emerges, the kind that Carl Jung believed was the foundation of true individuation. Jung taught that psychological maturity comes not from trying to become flawless, but from becoming whole. And wholeness, by its very nature, includes everything: the light and the dark, the noble and the shameful, the confident and the insecure. When you begin to accept that wholeness, you release the exhausting need to keep up an image for others or for yourself. Up until this point, much of your life may have been shaped by the persona, the mask you wore to be accepted, validated, or praised. You may have tried to be the strong one, the good one, the successful one, or the put-together one. But as you journey deeper into your soul, that persona becomes too tight, too fragile. You start to feel more peace in your messiness than in your polish. And slowly, a new internal voice arises, not one of judgment, but of compassion. This is what Jung called shadow integration. When you stop rejecting your flaws and start seeing them as parts of you that need attention, not rejection, you begin to heal from the inside out. You don't need to pretend anymore. You don't need to explain away your wounds. You no longer wear your perfection like armor. You let your humanness breathe. This shift transforms your relationship with yourself. When you fail, you don't collapse, you learn. When you feel insecure, you don't spiral, you observe. When you feel shame, you don't self-destruct, you get curious. When you're triggered, you don't project it, you go inward. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What part of me needs love, honesty, or integration right now?" And perhaps most radically, you start showing this real self to others. You stop hiding your scars. You let people see you when you're not at your best. You admit when you don't know, when you're afraid, when you need help, and what you discover is life-altering. People don't withdraw when you're imperfect. The right people come closer. This authentic self is magnetic, not because it performs well, but because it's real, it's rare, it's safe. You stop performing for love and start living in love. Love for your messy, beautiful, evolving self. And from that love, your presence becomes healing for others, because you give them permission to be human too. Jung insisted that the path to the self does not lead to sainthood or superiority. It leads to integration, and integration always includes imperfection. The more you make peace with your contradictions, the more whole you become. And in that wholeness, there is a calm power not loud or flashy, but deeply rooted. And so, the 15th undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life is this. You've stopped striving to be perfect. You've started choosing to be whole. You recognize that light alone is not enough. It must be anchored in shadow. Joy must be able to stand beside sorrow. Strength must coexist with softness. Courage must walk with fear. And the true self can only emerge when every part of you has a place at the table. You no longer live to be impressive. You live to be real. You no longer chase validation. You offer authenticity. You no longer seek perfection. You embody wholeness. And in that choice, your life begins to feel less like a performance and more like home. Part 16. An unstoppable creative longing returns. You no longer create for approval, but from the soul. As you grow more comfortable with your imperfection and step into wholeness, a powerful, almost irresistible force begins to rise from within, a creative longing that cannot be ignored. It doesn't come from your ego or a need for recognition. It comes from somewhere deeper, the soul's desire to be expressed in the world. At this stage, you are no longer content to merely observe life, you feel called to participate in it through creation. This doesn't always mean painting a masterpiece or writing a book. It may take countless forms: designing a garden, is launching a conscious business, inventing new ways of helping others, cooking with love, building spaces that heal, speaking truths that liberate. No matter the medium, the message is the same. You feel something inside you that needs to be brought to life. Carl Jung believed that creativity is not simply a gift. For the select few, it is a psychological necessity for wholeness. In fact, he saw creativity as one of the key signs that the self, the deepest part of the psyche, was beginning to move through you. When the inner and outer worlds begin to align, a current of energy is released. That energy demands form. It wants to move. It wants to be seen. It wants to breathe through your hands, voice, choices, and creations. This urge to create is not always convenient. In fact, it may disrupt your life. You may feel pulled away from the systems you've outgrown. You may feel a deep dissatisfaction with routines that don't honor your soul. The desk job, the sterile schedule, the scripted relationships, they begin to feel like prisons for your imagination. The desire to create becomes so strong, it can no longer be delayed, postponed, or negotiated. And here's the most beautiful part: you no longer care whether it's good. You're no longer creating to be liked. You're creating because your soul is overflowing. The creative process becomes your therapy, your meditation, your offering. You're not obsessed with outcomes anymore. You're in love with the process, with the flow, with the magic that happens when something comes through you that you didn't plan. Something honest, something raw, something real. You begin to realize that creativity is not about becoming someone. It's about revealing who you've always been. This is why many people at this stage suddenly change careers, start writing, take up painting, launch passion projects, or speak more openly. They're not chasing fame, they're responding to a soul command. The more you honor this creative pull, the more alive you feel. You don't burn out, because you're not operating from force, you're operating from alignment. And in this creativity, healing accelerates. You find clarity through expression, you process trauma through metaphor, you reclaim power through voice, you rediscover joy through play. Creation becomes an alchemical process. It doesn't just change the world around you, it transforms who you are inside. This is the moment Jung described as the creative synthesis of opposites. All the inner chaos you've experienced, the ego death, the emotional breakdowns, the shadow work, the identity shifts are no longer pulling you apart. They are now fueling your art, your words, your mission, your presence. What once fragmented you now inspires you. And that leads us to the 16th undeniable sign: you're entering the best phase of your life. You feel a creative fire within you that you can no longer suppress because your soul is ready to speak. You're no longer creating for performance, you're creating for presence. You're no longer creating to prove, you're creating to connect. You're no longer creating to impress, you're creating to be real. This is not about making things for applause. It's about making things that matter, things that carry your essence, things that only you can bring into the world. And in this act of creation, you are no longer just healing, you are becoming, not a version of you that the world asked for, but the version that your soul has waited for all along. Part 17. You begin to live your truth, no matter the consequences. At this stage of inner transformation, a profound shift occurs in how you relate to truth. It's no longer something you seek in books, mentors, or systems. It's something you begin to embody. And the most unmistakable sign: you start to live your truth, even when it's inconvenient, unpopular, or misunderstood. You no longer shape yourself to fit the world. Instead, you shape your life around your inner reality, your truth. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the journey of becoming your true self, requires nothing less than radical authenticity. This isn't surface-level honesty, like saying what's on your mind or being blunt. This is soul-level truth, the act of aligning your entire life, your decisions, relationships, work, and voice with the deepest parts of who you really are. In earlier phases of life, you may have told yourself stories to maintain peace. You might have compromised, pretended, or silenced your intuition to protect others' comfort or preserve appearances. But now, that becomes impossible. Not because you want to rebel, but because you can't betray yourself anymore. The cost is too high. This truth begins to show up everywhere. You leave conversations where you used to, people please. You stop nodding along when something in your gut says no. You decline opportunities that don't align with your values. You speak up not to fight, but to stand firmly in who you are. Living your truth doesn't mean life becomes easier. In fact, it may feel harder at first. You might face rejection, you might lose approval, friendships, or the safety of your previous identity. But even in that discomfort, you feel a strange liberation. You're no longer living to survive, you're living to be real. Jung emphasized that living truthfully often requires standing apart from the collective. The masses tend to favor conformity, not authenticity, but the self, once awakened, cannot go back to sleep. Once you've tasted the freedom of truth, you can no longer pretend. You would rather be misunderstood for who you are than loved for who you're not. This stage also births deep inner confidence, not the loud, inflated kind, but the grounded kind that doesn't need validation. You become internally referenced. You trust your own rhythm, even if others don't understand it. You no longer outsource your decisions to trends, institutions, or expectations. You look inward, and then you act outward. This truthfulness transforms your energy. People start to feel your clarity, your presence, your rootedness. You become magnetic not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Your yes carries weight. Your no commands respect. You become a mirror for others to reflect on their own truth, simply by being unapologetically yourself. And here's the most sacred part. When you live your truth, life starts to organize around your authenticity. You attract relationships, opportunities, and synchronicities that match your frequency, not the version you performed, but the person you've become. And everything that doesn't resonate, it naturally falls away. That leads us to the 17th undeniable sign that you're entering the best phase of your life. You've stopped negotiating with your soul. You've chosen to live your truth, regardless of who stays, who leaves, or what it costs. Because the price of self-abandonment is too steep. Because truth is not something you find, it's something you honor. Because the life that's truly yours cannot begin until the lies are done. In Jungian terms, this is the embodiment of the self. You're no longer split between who you are and who you think you should be. You are no longer chasing truth. You are the truth, lived, spoken, embodied. Part 18, Inner Peace. No longer depends on outer circumstances when the self becomes the center. You've faced your shadows, released the ego, embraced your pain, and lived your truth. And then something extraordinary happens, not all at once, but slowly, like dawn rising after the longest night. You begin to feel peace, a deep, unwavering peace that no longer depends on what's happening around you. Carl Jung described this stage as the return to the self, the integration of all the fragmented parts of your psyche into a centered, whole identity, not the persona, not the ego, not the old roles you used to play, but the real you. When this happens, your inner world becomes stable, grounded, and quietly luminous, even when the external world is chaotic. This peace is not passive. It's not about disengaging from life or pretending everything is okay. It's about knowing, at the deepest level, that you are okay even when nothing else is. You stop riding the emotional roller coaster of circumstances. You stop needing others to behave a certain way in order to feel calm. You stop basing your worth on outcomes, results, or validation. You begin to trust your own inner rhythm, your intuition, your boundaries. The storms still come, but now they don't shake you. You've developed psychic resilience, not because you've become numb, but because you've become anchored. You're no longer controlled by your fears or seduced by illusions. You've gone to the depths of your own soul and come back with your center intact. This inner peace also brings with it a kind of emotional spaciousness. You can feel without drowning. You can witness your thoughts without becoming them. You can respond instead of react. You can sit in discomfort without needing to fix or flee. This, Jung would say, is the fruit of individuation, not the absence of conflict, but the capacity to hold it with consciousness. You begin to value solitude not as escape, but as nourishment. You begin to speak less, but everything you say carries presence. You begin to move slower, but with far more precision and impact. You begin to love not from attachment, but from overflow. And you realize something: you've come home, not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself. The world may still try to pull you in 1,000 directions, but your compass is internal now. You've returned to your center, and that center is unmoved. This is the final, most undeniable sign that you are entering the best phase of your life. You no longer seek peace outside of yourself, because you've become the space where peace lives. And in that peace, there is clarity. In that clarity, there is strength. In that strength, there is purpose. And in that purpose, there is joy not fleeting, not conditional, but rooted in the sacred knowledge that you are whole. This is not the end of the journey, but it is a new beginning, one where you no longer live from fear, but from freedom, one where you no longer live to be seen, but to be true, one where you no longer live on the surface, but from the soul. If any of these signs are showing up in your life, don't resist them, embrace them. You're not breaking down, you're breaking through. Jung's wisdom isn't just theory, it's a guide to living from your soul. Hit like if this spoke to you, subscribe for more deep dives into Jungian psychology, and comment below, which sign are you experiencing right now? Until next time, stay conscious, stay courageous, and never stop evolving.